Hello, my name is Abigail Corfman. I've been making games for 5 years. I'm a designer, writer, and programmer. Pretty much the only thing I can't do is draw, which is why I'm about to give a talk about text-based games. I've won an award for innovative gameplay. Some of my stuff has been featured at Indiecade and PAX Megabooth. I currently freelance with a company called Gameloft. I write for Disney Dreamlight Valley, which is a game similar to Animal Crossing, but populated by Disney characters. So I get to write Merlin and Ursula being catty at each other. It's fun. My personal library includes Open Sorcery and Open Sorcery C++. The game I'm currently working on is called Hearth and Homes. I like puns. You'll notice a pattern of that in this. It's a mystery-solving life sim where you've just met a new, terribly good friend of yours. You're John Watson, and you've just met Sherlock Holmes, who is not very good at taking care of himself. He likes running around London and solving crimes, tackling murderers, and inhaling chemical fumes from his experiments. And it's your job to convince him to eat something and go to sleep. So that's almost all the pictures you're going to see in this presentation, because now we're talking about Twine. Twine is the most beautiful medium I have ever encountered for making stories. This is a talk about Twine and how awesome it is, but it's also a talk about the difference between stories and games, and that miracle of a moment when a story can become a game. There are many better, more complex and robust tools for making games, but Twine is a perfect tool for a writer to begin exploring game design, to make the leap from linearity to choice. Also, because Twine is so simple visually, we can talk about the tools of visual game design in a very simple context, which is a good way of exploring theory without getting too bogged down in minutia. This is Twine. You are actually currently looking at a Twine game. This is a website I made for the presentation using the Twine engine. And here are some logistical reasons why I like that engine. It's universal. Twine is an HTML web page and runs on anything that can run HTML, any browser, any operating system. It's easy to play. Gameplay in Twine is finding colored text, such as this, and clicking it to get to the next page. It's hard to get stuck in a Twine game because you have that constant thread pulling you forward. This is kind of a big deal, historically speaking, for text-based games, because text-based games originally were parser games, where you read text on a screen and you typed in what you wanted to do next, which meant a lot of puzzles involved trying to read the developer's mind and figure out what weird combination of exact words they wanted you to use. I consider Twine a leap forward in technology because you have to actively go against the grain of its design to get a player stuck. That was my geeky aside, and we'll be back to the third principle, which is that Twine is very simple to create. You can use an online utility to build in Twine using a very simple scripting language and a node-based architecture. Here's a picture of what the back end of this presentation looks like. You'll see we can trace our path. This is where I introduced myself. I talked about Dreamlight Valley, Hearth and Homes, and here's where we are right now in the map. And soon we'll get to slide 5, where these arrows show that we're about to have a branching path forward. This visual representation gets a lot more useful in complicated stories. This is the back end of my game Open Sorcery. I depend a lot on being able to see the node structure to remember how everything connects, and you can actually see the outline of the game in this. You can see the intro, which is fairly linear, and then you can see this is a sequence of places that people keep coming back to, which is why it's in a central location. They go down, and this extends way further down to lots of nodes that are the events that happen there. And then everything comes back to no threats detected, which is where you go to at the end of scanning a specific location. This is not an unusual thing in a game engine, but Twine, simple as it is, has it, and it's so useful. Here's one of my favorite Twine games. It's called Queers in Love at the End of the World by Anna Anthropy. The premise of this game is you're with a person you love. In 10 seconds, the world is going to end. You spend the game making choices about what you're going to do with them. It only takes 10 seconds. Let's play. Begin. It's the end of the world. You kiss her. You kiss her softly. You take her hand. You tell her you love her. And then everything is wiped away. Yeah. Oh, goodness, I really love that one. I love that game so much. It makes me think about how the way we express affection has weight, and how we have to pay attention because we don't know how much longer we have to say I love you. And that could have been a short story. It would have been a beautiful short story, but Twine lets us participate in it. It's that touch of interactivity that makes you so much more invested than passively reading. It makes it a game instead of a book. These are 3 principles that I consider most important when designing story games, and I'll discuss them through the medium of Twine. Twine is useful because it's so simple. It makes it very easy to show clear examples of these principles. The first is illumination. Stories with pictures are better. That may seem like an odd thing to say in a talk about text-based games. The thing is, the only thing more awesome than text is illuminated text. Monks in England knew that, and their wisdom passes on to us today. They put massive amounts of effort into making these beautiful illuminated manuscripts to make people more interested in the Bible. And it worked. When we talk about text and words, what we are really talking about is comics. Comics are what you get when you combine them, and they're one of the best ways we have of communicating information. Images are immediately recognizable. You see a picture of a chair, you know, that's a chair. You don't need any explanation. You see a picture of a person, and you're like, so much information. I see their expression. I see how they're feeling. I see their posture. I see what they're about to do. I see their clothing. I get context clues about what kind of a person this person is. But the limitation of pictures is that there's only so much you can get in terms of nuance and context, and text will explain what's going on in them. The example comic I have up here is by Scott McCloud. It's a picture of a room and a picture of a sequence in time. You can see all their characters and their attitudes at a glance, and then the text tells the story of how they're interacting and gives more information about their attitudes and relationships. Most lessons we learn from comics can be applied to other mediums where text is used in concert with images, like video games. And I encourage anyone interested in design to read Scott McCloud's Understanding Comics. But let's talk about very basic aspects, because that's what we're working with in Twine. The first is color. CSS, Cascading Style Sheets, lets you control the color of the background and the text. This is for mood setting, and it lets you add touches of color. The most important lesson I've learned about color when using Twine is don't overdo it, because you'll end up looking like a teenager's live journal post. And I can imagine a game where that would be good, and that would be the gameplay. I haven't made it yet, so far I've been somewhat minimalist with my choices in regards to that. The second principle is animation. There are all sorts of bouncing, jiggling, shaking animation you can have in games, and the thing about animation is it's for directing attention. In the ancestral environment, motion meant threat or opportunity. If someone walked in that door right now, everyone who is close to them would instinctively turn to look at them because that's motion in the peripheral of your eye, and you automatically turn towards motion. We use that principle in video games. It's present in that bouncing yellow exclamation mark over the quest giver that you encounter. And it's present in enemies who move quickly and glow red. You know you're supposed to pay attention to them because of the animation, because of the motion. So animate what is threatening to the player or what the player is supposed to do next. The last principle is sound. And in my mind, sound is for drawing people into the world of the game. Background music is a very basic way of doing this, another powerful tone-setting device in addition to color. And anyone who has ever watched Critical Role will know how well a well-placed sound effect can bring you into a story. The experience of clicking on text that says, "Open the door to the dark mansion," and hearing a long creak as the next page loads is very satisfying. Here are some examples of Twine games that use illumination very effectively. The first is Tiny Utopia. It's a game about a person in chronic pain who wakes up one morning and isn't in pain. It is one morning of freedom and one morning of peace, and what they do with that peace. So the thing that I'm looking at here is very simple. It's the color. It's so simple. It's just a gradient from light to dark on the screen, but it's perfect. It's fresh. It's that moment in the morning when the sun is just rising. And the game itself exists in the crux between that darkness and light. And it just sets exactly the vibe that this game needs to express this is a fresh, clear morning where nothing hurts for the first time in forever. And on the other side of the spectrum, we have Sleepless. Sleepless is set in a world where no one sleeps anymore. Humans have just lost the ability. You play as someone who hasn't slept in 2 months. Tragically, this game is no longer online, so I only have screenshots. So you'll immediately notice very different vibe, and it evokes the feeling of sleep deprivation. It's scratchy, it's dark, the text is small, it's a little hard to read. It's actually on the edge of where aesthetics impacts usability. I probably wouldn't make a game like this because I'd be worried it would make the text hard to read and make it inaccessible, but it's a great example. I also like this second screen where the text is off center, something's flickering in the peripheral of your vision, and it's actually in the peripheral of your vision. Another good example of using visual aspects of text. And this is a little further on in the game where you're talking to someone about the fact you're not sleeping. They ask, how long have you not slept? Over 2 months. And they ask you, are you tired? Am I tired? And that's not even an image, that's just a visual representation created by text. And I really like it. So those are two very different ways we have of using Twine styling abilities to illuminate text powerfully. The next principle I want to talk about is interactivity. Interactivity encourages engagement, keeps interest, incorporates disfluency. That screen was more interesting to me than all the other screens because I had to click to get through it. That act of interaction makes Twine and games in general a little more automatically engaging than just reading a book or watching a movie. You need to do something to move the story forward. Disfluency is an important concept. I specifically mean here cognitive disfluency, which is the concept that if it's harder to process information, we are more likely to retain it. This can be well expressed by, say you're reading a book, and you're just reading along, and maybe you'll retain it, maybe you won't, but you encounter a cipher, a part of the book that's in code, and you have to decode it. You are much more likely to remember the words that you decoded than you are to remember the rest of the book because of the effort you put into the decoding process. Twine and all games incorporate disfluency because you need to do something to progress. Like, click. Ash is a story that's only barely a game, and so is a great example of how a touch of disfluency can enhance a story. It's a short story about a person visiting their mother in the hospital. We start the game in the hospital. You encounter your mother. You can observe she's bored. She seems strangely calm. She's been alone for a while. You can try to reassure her. You can raise her spirits, try to cheer her up. You can notice that she's grimacing with pain or that she's gripping your hand. And all these choices are somewhat shallow, in that they don't change the trajectory of the story. It's going to go the way it's going to go, regardless of those choices that you've made. But they still matter. And also making those small choices, being a part of the process of connecting to the character's mother, makes you more a part of the story than you would have if you were just reading it. I think there's a good lesson to take from this for any game that involves dialogue or cutscenes, which is never go too long without giving the player a chance to choose something, even if it's something very simple. Players expect engagement, and it's important that we give that to them. And it's as easy as the click of a button. The last one is where Twine really shines. It's just so easy. It's very simple to learn. If you know JavaScript, honestly, if you know any scripting, you almost already know Twine. And if you know JavaScript, you can do anything with it. It's infinitely expandable, which I have done somewhat to my detriment because I've hacked it apart to the point where updates to the engine spoil the stuff I built. So don't be like me, but do expand responsibly. It's also utterly portable. I mentioned before, it's an HTML page. It can go anywhere. This makes it super easy for prototyping. I've used it to prototype games before I've decided to commit to them and make them in a more robust engine. It doesn't need imagery, you don't need complex programming languages or anyone else. You can just toss game mechanics in it and see if it works. I use Twine. Oh, I love using Twine for putting together games for ARGs and LARPs. That's alternate role-playing games and live-action role-playing games. Hello. So, for example, a few years ago, I made Twine for a Battlestar Galactica LARP that we ran together, a big team of us. And the Twine game was on a big screen and other laptops in various rooms. And it had the status of the ship on it. So you could see navigation, on. Engines, on. Life support, not on. That's a problem. And that was a problem that the players had to solve. And they did that by engaging with a Twine game. They solved various challenges and then typed the words and codes and stuff that they got into the Twine. And eventually they got that life support to be on and green, and everyone was excited. And it was even more like immersive because they didn't have a person walk up to them and say, hey, you got the life support on, congratulations. They actually looked at the computer and saw the blinking green light finally go straight and solid. And it was so easy because it's very easy to throw together a Twine game. It can really enhance an experience. So those are the principles that distinguish Twine, and I think that we can extrapolate from them to understand game design in general better. Twine, it may have been obvious from this presentation, but Twine was my path to video game development. And now I want to briefly discuss techniques from storytelling that I brought over from writing that I think make games better. The first is meaningful choice. People have a powerful, intuitive understanding of when they are actually making a difference. If a choice is shallow, players can tell. They know the choice of whether to pick the pink dress or the blue dress won't have long-reaching complications. If you can communicate that their choices matter, that they will have serious ramifications into the state of the world that they've invested their time in, that's going to make them feel powerful and add profound gravitas to the game. The second important thing, which is very linked, is real characters. There used to be, we're getting a lot better at it, but a dearth of this in the industry. And even still, if you make real characters, people will notice. Because I think the reason for that is that it's very scary to make real characters, because you need to take a piece of yourself and rip it out and put it into what you've created, and then everyone can see it, and everyone can judge it. And that's scary. But if people see that, and they see that what you've created is real, they'll respond to it, and they'll care about it. And because they care about the character, the world itself will have a new element of reality, because it's inhabited by someone that they've come to love. And that creates investment, and that will lead them to care about making meaningful choices, and the characters that they're making meaningful choices about. And the last one is Hemingway shortness. It's best to have a brevity. When you have text, you want to make it quick. You want to make it preferably punchy, and you want to make it to the point. Players want interactivity and will only wait so long to have it again. People don't have a huge attention span. We live in a culture of memes, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Quality writing is succinct. It contains a lot of information in an elegant, constrained package, and it's an ideal worth striving towards. That was my talk. Thank you for listening. I think we have plenty of time for questions, if anyone has any.
Like this is like very easy to do. But in your experience with Twine, have you encountered it? Is there like a limit to how far you can push it?
There's a limit to how far you can push it without destroying it. I have leapt beyond that limit and played in the wreckage of what I have wrought. Fundamentally, anything you can do with a web page, you can do with Twine. So the simple answer is no, and the longer answer is no, but be careful.
So I've been following some text-based games for the past month and a half thereabout,
Mm-hmm.
and I've seen many of them take their inspirations from public domain properties. I know someone had made a text-based game off of the Great Gatsby when it became public domain.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on people taking those public domain IPs and making games out of them?
Best. Wonderful. I'm about to make a game out of Sherlock Holmes, so yeah, I'm in support. Honestly, I really wish we had a more relaxed attitudes towards IPs. I think we were. It's a little sad that there are a lot of characters and premises that we can't collectively tell stories with. And I understand why that is, but it's also a little sad. Thank you.